Hi everyone, my name is Alexis Rumps, and today I'm going to be talking over and presenting my final project for this class. The two fiction novels I chose to use from class are Behold the Dreamers by Julia Otsuka and The Refugees, specifically the short story I'd Love You to Want Me by Viet Thanh Nguyen. The true story I used in my project is another series of short stories by Viet Thanh Nguyen titled The Displaced Refugee Writers on Refugee Lives, which is made up of refugee authors that write about their experiences and journeys as immigrants. I chose to use poems as my creative medium for this project, as writing has always been a stronger creative outlet for me, whether that be journaling, taking notes in class, writing a card or a letter to a friend. Once I put my pen to paper, it's kind of hard for me to stop. So I felt as though poems would be an adequate way to present this project. I wrote a series of 4 poems based on 4 different true short stories from various authors. These 4 poems highlight the themes of memory explored throughout the true short stories of refugee experiences, as well as how they connect and relate to the 2 fictional narratives that I chose that we read in class. The first poem I wrote is titled Remembered Life, which references the short story To Walk in Their Shoes by Maren Hedero. The story focuses on the moments when the author recalls the first moments she can recollect of her life in Germany, being and becoming a refugee. This story reminded me specifically of Buddha in the Attic, when the young Japanese immigrants gave birth to children from the men they were assigned to marry. These children were taught Japanese words, ideas, traditions, and customs that they wouldn't know in America, yet they couldn't remember them. In both of these stories, these children had to give up their given world, languages, and more to embrace the new world's languages and all that they were living in at the moment. In Hedero's case, she had to go through this multiple times, being accustomed to new environments, new people, none of which felt normal or like home at all. The second poem I wrote is titled Put It All on the Line, which is based off of the short story titled The Parent Who Stays, written by Rana Grande. This short story focuses on the experience of a child immigrant whose parents left her altogether at 9.5 years old, with family who treated her as she was a stranger. She grew up under the impression of being abandoned by her father. Then when her mother left to join him, she had nothing and felt worthless. After 3 attempts to cross the border herself, she finally made it across. This story gives insight into an experience lived out by a true refugee and her family. And I'd Love You to Want Me, Professor Khan experiences a loss in memory, which is my chosen theme to present on, and ends up calling Mrs. Khan by a different name. I felt this fiction novel was similar to Grande's, as both her father and Professor Khan were once known and loved by their families. But because of separation in Grande's story and medical challenges in Nguyen's, both men have become strangers to the people they love. The third poem I wrote is titled Who Am I? This poem is based off of the short story Last, First, Middle, written by Joseph Azam. This poem was written to highlight the journey through which Joseph goes through a change in identity by the use of memory. His grandfather chose his name at birth, Muhammad Yusuf Azam, and by the end of the short story, his name in America was known as Joseph Muhammad Yusuf Azam. Joseph went on a journey throughout his childhood, trying to find out who he really was, who he was in his homeland, to his parents, for himself, and who he was in America. This true short story in general reminded me of Buddha in the Attic, when the white Americans figured out they could rename their maids and housekeepers so that they could better suit their needs. To me, these stories resemble each other, as Joseph went through a name transition similar to these maids, but in a way it was different. My fourth and final poem is titled What is a Refugee? This poem was written based off of the short story titled A Refugee Again, written by Vu Tran. This poem was written to highlight the complexities of living a double life as a refugee, having to find a new identity, accommodating parts of yourself to exist in a new world, and the feeling of being invisible. This short story went through the journey of being an immigrant, as well as asking the question of what is a refugee. This story utilized the theme of memory frequently as well. Also, the author reflected back on his time in Vietnam and his life there often. The story often exemplified how the author relied on memory and to show the contrast of life between countries. I will provide copies of my poems below with my discussion post for reference. From this project, I've been able to gain a great understanding and sense of empathy for those that immigrate and are labeled as refugees. Reading through these stories from authors who are sharing their story, I feel immense empathy for those experienced times such as these, and it also puts into perspective those who are still living in extreme poverty and other conditions that wish to seek asylum in the U.S. Thank you.